Hello, everyone. This is Deanna Minnick, and welcome to the Detox Summit. We have a very special guest today, Dr. Joseph PIzzorno. And Dr. PIzzorno has incredible credentials. And if I could read his entire bio, you would just be completely mesmerized by all of the different things that he's done and all of his contributions to naturopathic medicine and science. So let me just give you a short thumbnail of some of his very prominent accomplishments. So Dr. PIzzorno is a naturopathic physician. He's an educator, researcher, and expert spokesperson. And he's also the founding president of Bastyr University, which I'm sure many of you have heard of, being really a premier school in naturopathic medicine education. Under his leadership, Bastyr became the first accredited multidisciplinary university of natural medicine and the first NIH-funded center for alternative medicine research. Dr. PIzzorno has also written a number of books. He's the founding editor-in-chief of Integrative Medicine, a clinician's journal. It's one of my favorite journals, especially his editorial that I always find them very captivating and very insightful. This journal is the most widely distributed peer-reviewed journal in the field. And in 2007, he became the integrative medicine and wellness expert for WebMD. So, in addition to traveling worldwide, he consults, he lectures, he has his own company, Cellugenesis. He brings so much to the plate with respect to the wealth of information that he holds on natural medicine and even has books by that very title. So, thank you, Dr. PIzzorno, for being a part of the Detox Summit.
Well, thank you for the very kind introduction.
Great. Well, I'm wanting for the listeners to get a sense of your own personal journey, and perhaps you can take us way back in your life. What really gave you the impetus or the spark? What was the catalyst to go down this path of becoming a naturopathic physician, starting a school, and being the writer that you are, getting this information out? What were some of those catalysts for you?
Oh, good question. So it all started in about 1970 when I was working in medical research. My goal at that time in life was to get a PhD and do medical research. And then a strange thing happened. So I was at University of Washington School of Medicine, Department of Rheumatology, and we were trying to find a cure for rheumatoid arthritis and other kinds of arthritis. And I was working with MDs and PhDs and really enjoying the work. And then a strange thing happened. The woman who married my roommate from college, I went to a college called Harvey Mudd College, she had been suffering from juvenile rheumatoid arthritis since she was a teenager. And then one day we were having dinner together and she said, well, my arthritis is gone. I said, wait a minute, our arthritis is gone. This is an incurable disease. What happened? She said, well, I went to a naturopathic doctor. And I said, what? Because I had never heard of anything other than medical doctors. And he said, yes, I went to this naturopathic doctor. So being the inquiring science kind of guy, I said, well, I want to meet this guy and see what he did. So I went to this to this naturopathic doctor. I asked him what he did for my friend, and he said, well, I detoxified her liver and taught her how to eat properly. I think to myself, well, that's strange. What's her liver have to do with her hands and her knees being swollen? And so I said, well, can I spend a few days with you watching you see patients? So I spent a few days with him, and I would see patient after patient who was, quote, a medical failure come to this guy and with natural medicines and herbs and nutrition and lifestyle and diet and such, he'd cure them. So I was just fascinated and decided that instead of going to get a PhD in medical research, I was going to become a naturopathic doctor instead.
Wow, what a story to really propel you forward. And there's nothing like actually seeing the proof and witnessing somebody's benefit through the experience of having that exposure to natural medicine to really inspire you.
Yes.
So you know what's interesting is that you mentioned that for her with arthritis, that it was all about detoxing the liver. So it sounds like, even back in the 1970s, we were hearing this idea about detoxification.
Yes, but you were only hearing it from the natural medicine doctors. While there might have been a few medical doctors and chiropractors interested, this idea was kept alive in the culture by the naturopathic doctors. And so there was this whole kind of philosophical approach about how you take care of patients, and a key part of it was detoxification. So I remember one of my old-time professors way back in 1971 said to us, and you'll find this kind of interesting little aphorism, he said, when in doubt, detoxify the liver. And one of my other instructors said, uh, all disease begins in the colon. Now, at the time, I thought these were kind of quaint ideas. But boy, with the recent research, it is quite remarkable how accurate these fellows were long before the research was available. But they were very good with their clinical observation. They could see what was going on with patients, and from that, understand what to do.
Now, why has this only been seen in naturopathic medicine? Isn't it odd? I mean, these two physicians were so keen in their observation to see the liver and the colon as these localized sites to really go after with nutrition. So why hasn't the idea of nutritional detoxification permeated throughout allopathic medicine?
Yeah, that's a very good question. I think there were a couple of reasons for that. Uh, Conventional medicine got a lot of its advances by standardizing disease, standardizing the diagnosis of the disease, and standardizing the treatment of disease. Now, this model works great if you have like an infectious disease. Well, you have a bacterial pneumonia. Well, great, diagnose it, kill the bacteria with antibiotics, and great results. But we have a problem that kind of goes across body systems and is not associated with a specific disease. That kind of problem gets lost in the medical system. So the idea of broad nutritional deficiencies or broad effects from environmental toxins does not fit that model, so they don't teach it. And they've been taught to think only about disease, but they've been taught that the medical system is the best possible medicine anywhere in the world, and anything anybody else is doing obviously isn't any good, because if it was good, we'd be teaching it. So they've been kind of given a disincentive to consider anything other than disease diagnosis and disease treatment.
Exactly. And some people in the allopathic medical model would argue that even the reverse, that detoxification practices are kind of woo-woo, or this is kind of a myth, and even maybe are going against the idea of detoxification rather than just ignoring it. Would you say that you've encountered that throughout your vast experience?
Well, certainly. And I want to be clear, I'm not anti-conventional medicine. Conventional medicine has done a lot of great in the world. And also, I'm not in favor of saying everything is because of toxicity, nor is every detoxification protocol a valid protocol. So it's not like there aren't plenty of things to throw rocks at on both sides of the aisle here.
Exactly. So perhaps you can guide us down. I mean, what you said is very key there. That it's all about the proper protocol for the patient, and to have it personalized. So, what might be just a standard general protocol within naturopathic medicine that one would use in order to take a patient through the detoxification process without kind of looking at all the different permutations, but what would be kind of the standard flow of that process?
Well, as I always tell my students, diagnose first and treat second. Okay. So, yes, there are some general detoxification things you can do, but it's also better to know what toxins the person has so you can optimize your intervention. So the first step is, if you can, figure out what toxins the person is exposed to. Then the second part is stop the toxins, stop the exposure to toxins. So a lot of people get into these very intricate, scientific sounding detoxification programs, which may be fine. But if you're not getting rid of the source of the toxin, why bother? So a classic example I give on that is mercury. So one of the things that the kind of holistically oriented detoxification doctors do is they become very concerned about mercury in the body. Most of the mercury in the body comes from so-called silver fillings, which are actually 55% mercury. And so they basically advise people to get the fillings out of their mouth and put them on a chelation program to get the mercury out of the body that's been leaked in from the amalgams. So there's a very interesting study. So I've read literally over 1,000 articles on mercury. And one article I read by the conventional dentists was showing how stupid it was to give people chelation therapy. And the reason they showed that is they said, okay, here's a patient with blood levels of mercury and a mouth with mercury fillings, they had 20 fillings in their mouth. And they gave them chelation therapy, and sure enough, their blood levels of mercury went down. But 24 hours later, their mercury levels were right back where they were. So they said, see, chelation therapy doesn't work. Okay, well, that's true. Chelation therapy doesn't work if you don't get rid of the source of the mercury. So the
Mm-hmm.
clear message there is, detoxification is great, but you've got to get rid of the source first and then detoxify.
Right. And it's the whole idea of retoxing. We don't want to retox after the detox.
Absolutely.
So, since you're such an expert on mercury and have read over 1,000 articles, maybe we can talk a little bit about that because it's one of the toxins of great interest for probably many of our listeners.
Yes.
Perhaps you can detail us on what are the sources of methylmercury in the environment? Where would we be exposed?
So at this point, I think the two major environmental toxins that are problematic for people, number one is mercury, and the second one is the chemical toxins we're exposed to, which are called persistent organic pollutants. So let's go with mercury first. So mercury, the primary sources of mercury are silver fillings first. So silver fillings contain about a half a gram of mercury. And every silver filling leaks about 1 microgram of mercury into the body every day. Now, not all of it is absorbed because it goes into the saliva and then into the digestive tract, but significant portion of it is. Now, notice I said 1 microgram per filling. That's not microgram per tooth with fillings. And one of the reasons why some of the dental data does not find a good correlation between mercury fillings and mercury in the body is that they tend to primarily do the number of teeth with fillings rather than the number of fillings in the teeth. And so if you do the number of teeth with fillings, you get a correlation with blood levels and, by the way, brain levels, but it's not real strong. But if you do it with the number of fillings, you get a very, very strong correlations. So you can have a tooth which has 1 filling in it or a tooth which has 6 fillings in it. Tooth with 6 fillings is leaking 6 times as much mercury. So that's the primary source for most people. But of course, not everybody has silver fillings. And also a person may have gold caps and say, oh, what? There's no mercury in my mouth. I have gold caps. See? Often the gold caps are put on over the mercury. And so it actually increases the rate at which the mercury is excreted from the tooth. Okay, so you want to make sure there's no mercury in the teeth. And by the way, if you are going to get the mercury out of your teeth, it's critical that you go to a holistically or ecological dentist to make sure that the mercury is taken out in a way that's safe, because a regular dentist will take the mercury out by basically drilling the teeth. That causes the mercury to evaporate and get breathed in, and you basically increase the amount of mercury in the person's blood by 50 to 100%, and it lasts for 2 years before the body can get rid of it. So make sure you go to the right dentist. The second primary source of mercury is fish. And of course, it depends upon the kind of fish people are eating. So if you're eating big fish like tuna and bass, those and shark, things like that, the fish eat a lot of other fish. They have a lot of mercury in them. But if you eat the small fish, like sardines, small salmon, small mackerel, not big mackerel, but small mackerel, anchovies, they all have very low mercury, and they also have a lot of omega-3 fatty acids, which are very healthy for people. Now, after that, it depends upon the person's environment what the next major source of mercury is. And by the way, I'm assuming we're not looking at industrial exposure because that can be a major source. So there's some areas in the world that have high mercury in the water, and there's some areas that have high mercury in the air. And of course, there's a whole issue about mercury in vaccinations being a source of mercury. Now, I am unclear at this point about how significant a source of mercury is vaccinations. There's no question that there is mercury in the vaccinations, and it's injected into the body and it's absorbed. I think for adults, amalgams and fish is far greater dosage. For children who don't have fillings already, that's probably a significant source, but the research is not clear at this point. The other area to be aware of is in the air. And basically, there's one primary source of mercury in the air, and that's from coal burning. You get coal burning both for the production of electricity. So, for example, in New England, where most energy is produced by burning of coal, you have a lot of mercury in the air in the New England area. And you get another source of mercury is when cement's being made, because they use coal as part of the process for making cement. Now, even if you don't have electric energy production in your area, you can still have mercury, because Seattle, where I live, unfortunately has high mercury in the air, but we do not burn coal for energy here. What's happening is the primary source of energy production in China is burning of coal. And so that mercury is released up to the air, gets up into the jet stream, and deposits in the Pacific Northwest. So the only way to know how much mercury is in the air is you actually go to an EPA website that actually shows you areas of the country where there's high levels of mercury. And right now, the primary areas are Puget Sound area and New England area.
So that's within the United States. Are there other areas in the world where there is this high concentration of mercury? Would we
Oh,
say?
absolutely.
What would
Yeah,
be
so
some of
so
the
China
other
so China so
areas?
China
hmm
China is a great example of very high levels of mercury
hmm
in the air.
Okay. And what about in Europe? Any countries there to speak of?
There's going to be some there, but I haven't looked at the data there, so I can't tell you how
Okay.
much is there.
Okay. Well, that's pretty concerning. So, the air, the water, vaccinations, what we're eating, what's in our mouth. It seems that there are so many opportunities for this exposure. So, is mercury easy to eliminate from the body?
Unfortunately, no, and that's why it's a problem. It's very hard for the body to get rid of mercury. We do have mechanisms for getting rid of the mercury. The body will get rid of mercury in the air, in the hair. It'll urinate it away. It'll get it out through the feces. The body does try to get rid of it, but it's very, very hard to get rid of. The good news is that there are some things we can do to help the body get rid of the mercury more efficiently. There's there's kind of two basic strategies. One strategy is to use chelation therapy, and that's where we give the person intravenous a drug called DMPS. Now, the good thing about DMPS is that it binds to mercury and gets out in the urine very efficiently. The problem is that a significant number of people have an adverse reaction to the DMPS injection. Now, why that's happening is unclear, but some people get what's called kind of brain fog. Turns out I'm one of those people. So I was one of those people that was really surprised to find that I had high levels of mercury because I basically don't have any silver fillings in my mouth, never have. When I eat fish, I try to eat low mercury fish, but I live in Seattle and I exercise a lot. I was getting mercury from the air. So I did try the IV chelation therapy, and my wife said they would take about 4 days after the chelation therapy for my brain to be working properly again.
Hmm.
So problematic. So I developed an oral chelation program that I've now used on literally thousands of people, and I can happy to say that it works. It's based on basically three concepts. Number one is the body gets rid of mercury all the time, and one of the primary ways it does that is through the liver, through the bile, into the gut, where it binds to fiber in the gut and is excreted out. The problem is over 90% of the mercury excreted from the liver into the gut is reabsorbed through something called intrahepatic recirculation.
hmm
So now, me, I'm a naturopathic doctor, and I think the body has tremendous wisdom. And I wonder, well, why does the body go through all this effort to get rid of mercury through the liver and then just reabsorb it? Well, if you think about it, as we evolved as a species, we had a lot more fiber in our diet. So standard American diet right now has 10 to 15 grams of fiber a day, whereas the diet we evolved on as a species had 100 to 150 times as much, 100, 150 grams of fiber, which is 10 times as much. So a mechanism which fails in modern days worked very efficiently when we're exposed to mercury from eating fish, when we're evolving as a species. So strategy number one is increase a person's fiber as much as you can. So there are several sources of fiber you can use. I use something called PGX, which is a commercial brand, but my impression is any kind of fiber, flax fiber, oat bran fiber. I don't like wheat fiber because I think it's too hard on the body, but oat bran fiber, there are a lot of these kinds of fibers that people can use. That's number one. So we're basically helping the body do what it intends to do anyway. The second method is to give people a nutrient called N-acetylcysteine, or NAC for short. Now, NAC is very interesting because it does two things. One is it directly binds to methylmercury, and methylmercury is the most toxic form of mercury in the body, and it actually excretes it out through the urine. So if you give a person NAC, you actually see an increase in urinary mercury. So that's really good. Also of interest, there's been research done in animals, unfortunately not done in humans, but when we look at pregnant like rats, and we expose them to mercury, unfortunately mercury gets into the fetus. So research has shown if you get a pregnant rat, NAC, not only does the mercury in the brain of the pregnant mother decrease, but the mercury in the brain of the fetus decreases as well. So I really like NAC. Now, unfortunately, I can't tell pregnant women that's a good idea to take NAC when you're pregnant because nobody studied it. So I would think it's a good idea, but I don't know if it is. So word of caution. Now, the other thing NAC does, which is really important, is it increases the body's production of glutathione. Now, why that's important is for several reasons. First off, mercury is a very strong oxidating chemical, particularly in the neurological system. And one of the ways the body protects itself from mercury is with glutathione. So we use glutathione both to get rid of the pro-oxidants that are being produced by the mercury, but also will bind to mercury to help get it out of the body. So glutathione in the brain will help pump mercury across the blood-brain barrier and get into the blood so that it get out through the kidneys. And then glutathione in the cells, then as I said before, helps them protect them from the oxidative damage. So I recommend 500 to 1,000 milligrams a day of the NAC, and the good news is that's very, very safe. Just like fiber is very, very safe. The third thing I do is I give people a drug orally called DMSA. And what DMSA does is it's absorbed orally. It binds to mercury as well as lead and gets it out through the urine. Now, I don't use a lot because I don't like using a lot of drugs. I use a relatively low amount, but I do it over long periods of time. So I typically will use 250 milligrams of DMSA twice a week, and then we just basically follow people's mercury levels over time. So let me give you an anecdote. So first off, I've used this with a lot of people, and I'll tell you, looking at a lot of people, that mercury levels were dropped by 40% over 1 year doing this protocol. So here I had a patient, which I just got some data on her. It was quite interesting. So I first met her about a year and a half ago. She was having a lot of trouble with mercury. Her mercury levels were, doing challenge testing, were 55, which is a really high number. She was having a lot of mental problems, fatigue, memory loss, mental confusion, just all the typical things you see with mercury. She'd been going to a chelation doctor who was giving her an IV DMPS, but she had to stop the treatment because, one, it wasn't working very well, but worse, she was having really bad brain fog from it. So I happened to meet her, and I told her about my protocol, and in desperation, she gave it a try, and she was so happy. 9 months after starting the protocol, her levels dropped from 55 to 22, and then 6 months after that, 9 months after that, she's been doing it for a year and a half now. 9 months after that, they had dropped down to 6. And her symptoms totally cleared up.
Nice.
Yeah, nice. So this was a patient who was just so pleased with the results because indeed we were able to have just a huge impact on her health, and it was safe. It was really safe, no adverse events with the patient, and she got just so much better.
Mm-hmm. So with these three parts, the first one being the increased fiber, the second one being the N-acetylcysteine, and the third one being the DMSA, do you feel that it really needs to be all three pieces? Could somebody try to increase their fiber and get some N-acetylcysteine and see some relief as well? Or do you feel that having that oral chelator really makes the difference and kind of creates that synergy with the other two?
So each of them individually would be expected to work, but without question, the synergy of them together is the best benefit. So one of the things that the DMSA is doing is, while the DMSA is chelating the mercury out through the urine, about half of it is going out through the bile. So again, if you don't have enough fiber there, then that's going to be reabsorbed. So by having the fiber there along with the DMSA, then the DMSA is being more effective.
So, if I guess just to back up a bit, I think this is a very compelling protocol, by the way, and it sounds like you've had such great effects and you've been using it over some time. Yeah. I'm just wondering, for the people that are listening, they're going to become very curious about this and maybe even think that they might have some issues with mercury toxicity. How would somebody know? Is it just enough to think that you've got brain fog and some other symptoms, mental confusion and such, fatigue, that all symptoms might start to point in that direction? Or would you advise first testing and having some specific diagnostics? Maybe you can speak to, you did already mention hair, urine, and feces, but, should everybody be tested before they embark on such a protocol?
Oh, absolutely. Again, as I said before, and I say again, diagnose first, treat second. Mm-hmm. So you could be having all kinds of symptoms, but if you're treating the wrong reason, then you're not going to get any better. But not only that, if it is mercury, then you need to retest yourself to make sure the protocol you're using is working for you.
Wonderful.
So the protocol that I use for determining mercury toxicity is a little bit different from what most doctors are using, because most doctors will check for mercury and they'll give people oral DMPS, typically 300 milligrams. So you basically take the person's urine, give them 300 milligrams of DMPS, then collect their urine for 6 hours, and then you compare the two urines. So the first urine tells you current exposure to mercury, and then the second urine after the challenge test tells you the body load of mercury. And this is great for determining mercury. But the problem is people aren't exposed to just mercury. There's also lead out there. There's also cadmium, particularly if they're a smoker. They have a lot of cadmium in their body. So I use a protocol which is 300 milligrams of DMPS plus 500 milligrams of DMSA orally. And then again, we check the urine first, give them both these drugs together, and then collect the urine for 6 hours and check the urine again. And the nice thing about this is it also will then tell you not only mercury level in the body, but also lead and cadmium. So much better assessment of metal load.
Right, right. And you're getting at more metals that way. Now, one of the things that I remember reading, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, is that most, and I think you alluded to it to some degree, that you said that much of mercury it goes through the bile and it's going through the gut for excretion into the stool. So what I'm curious about is that most of the diagnostics that are available are looking at hair and they're looking at urine. Is it often that practitioners are looking at stool levels of mercury, where 80% of the mercury is excreted?
Yeah, it's a very good question, and the body does excrete through various mechanisms. And right now, I believe that the best protocol is this challenge testing. I think stool testing will be useful. There's been research on that. The problem is there's been research on all these various methods of determining mercury, and there's no gold standard at this point. So, for example, you may want to look at mercury in the hair because that's one of the ways body gets rid of it. But the problem is people have genetic variations in how efficiently they get rid of mercury in the hair. So the same thing in the gut. Depending upon how much fiber the person has, depending upon how efficiently they're pumping out the mercury through the bile, it will affect how much mercury is in the stool. So I have not done stool testing for this because even though it has some benefits, it's a protocol which is hard to get patients to do. So I prefer to do those protocols which the patients will do, and that one I just couldn't get much compliance.
Yeah, yeah, I can imagine. What about, Dr. Pizzorno, what about sweat? Is that a vehicle for the release of mercury? And would things like sauna and hydrotherapy be conducive to excreting mercury, or is that not a viable route?
Great question. Okay, so as a researcher is Dr. Stephen Genuis. So he's an MD in Edmonton, Canada, who has done a lot of research on toxicity, and he specifically looked at this question of sweating/saunas to see what that does for getting rid of heavy metals. And interestingly, and this is really exciting for me, he found that sweating is the most effective way he could find to get rid of cadmium. Now, the reason this is important is that it's very, very hard to get cadmium out of the body because what happens if you do a chelating agent that binds to cadmium, it tends to get stuck in the kidneys. So you may know that some time ago, and still to some degree, but 20, 30 years ago, there are a lot of doctors doing chelation therapy for cardiovascular disease. So I give people chelation therapy. It would take the calcium out of their arteries. The arteries will open up. But the problem is also taking cadmium out, and the cadmium will deposit in the kidneys. And a lot of people went into kidney failure because of cadmium poisoning.
Mm.
Okay, so it basically somewhat discredited that methodology. So all of us who've been in this field, when we see people with high cadmium levels, which basically is every smoker, I can tell you who's a smoker and who's not because smokers' levels are way higher than people who don't smoke. The problem is it's hard to get rid of it. So he
Yeah.
showed that as people sweat, they get rid of cadmium in their sweat very, very efficiently. So yes, that's a good methodology. Unfortunately, you don't tend to get a lot of mercury, nor do you tend to get a lot of lead in the sweat, but you do get a lot of the persistent organic pollutants. So that was also very exciting. He found that you get rid of these chemical toxins through the sweat quite efficiently.
Yes.
Now, one other little anecdote that goes with this, or not just anecdote, but might say historic observation, is an old-time naturopathic treatment for patients trying to get off of smoking, to stop smoking, was the wet sheet therapy. So what they do is have the patient get really warm, like typically in a sauna. Then they wrap them up in cold, wet sheets and then cover that with wool. And the patient would then profusely sweat. And in the sweating, you see all this tar and gunk in the sheets. You actually see the stuff coming out people's skin into the sheets. And I think to myself, also, they'll get rid of the cadmium. So even though the old timers didn't know what they were doing other than that they were detoxifying, modern research is showing that yes, indeed, they were detoxifying and they get rid of that cadmium, which is such a problem from cigarette smoking.
Oh, I really like that. What a great, and again, you can see how these traditions carry forth and how we start to look at them very differently with 21st century eyes and see the wisdom, what was being done then. So, Dr. Pizzorno, you mentioned the liver and the colon very early on from different physicians who had recognized the importance of those organs in detoxification. One that I think gets overlooked, but yet you just mentioned it, and I'd like you to go a little bit deeper on that front, is that of the kidney. So perhaps you can tell us a little bit more about the role of the kidney in detoxification of toxins in the body.
Yes, everybody, a good question. Everybody thinks about the liver as being so important for detoxification, and there's no question that it is, because most of the chemicals we're exposed to, the liver breaks them from toxic chemicals into less toxic chemicals that the body can then deal with. And the way the body typically deals with them is that the liver makes the toxic chemicals water soluble, so that they can go to the kidneys and get excreted out through the kidneys. So basically, most of the important detoxification done by the liver is also dependent upon the kidneys working properly, or else you just can't get rid of the stuff. So therein lies a very interesting question. That is, how do you detoxify the kidneys? And I'm going to have to tell you, I don't know. Okay. I have read some things about people asserting various methodologies, but frankly, there's not been enough research, or I have not seen enough research in this area for me to feel confident that I would be giving you the right kind of information.
Okay. So, and I recall reading about different botanicals that might help the kidneys to function better. And I've also read about pH. Do you think that there's anything to this whole issue of acid-alkaline balance and helping the kidneys to prevent the resorption of toxins? Is there anything within that as a cornerstone of naturopathic medicine?
Huge. So this is a concept, this idea that an acid-forming diet is bad for you and an alkaline-forming diet is good for you, has been around in natural medicine for a long time. And up until about 10 years ago, was routinely dismissed, because when you look at the person's pH, and this is typically done by looking at the pH of the blood, and you put a person on an acid-forming diet, put them on an alkaline-forming diet, and you don't see any change in the pH of the blood. So the medical authorities dismissed it as a bunch of, well, they didn't use very nice names, but we'll just say they didn't think it was valid. Okay. Then something interesting happened. Some researchers started looking more carefully into it and realizing that the blood pH just does not change, because the body works really hard to maintain the blood pH very, 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 very stably, because if the blood pH changes very much, you die. Okay, so the body works to stabilize it. But they start saying, well, what about looking at the cells? How about the pH of the cells? They started looking at the effect of diet on the pH of the cells, and sure enough, huge effect. And we will get to the kidneys in a moment, by the way. So it turns out that the body has to go through a lot of metabolic work to deal with the excess acidity of the modern diet. So if you look at the diet we evolved on, it had what was called 35 milliequivalents of alkalinity in the diet we evolved on as a species. Our modern Western diet has 80 milliequivalents acidity every day. So it's 130 milliequivalents of increased acidity. So what happens is the body does several things. The first thing that happens is the lungs do their best to get rid of the excess acidity by exhaling more carbon dioxide. But there's not very much they can do, because if you do too much breathing, they get too much oxygen, and that's then toxic. So the lungs get a little more active, but there's a limit to what they can do. So the biggest load ends up on the kidneys. So what the kidneys do is the kidneys have to excrete more ammonia, more uric acid. They also have to excrete, well, there's other things that they do as well, but they primarily do those two things. But again, the kidneys can't quite get all of the excess acidity. So the final thing the body does is it takes calcium from the bone and then binds the calcium to the acidity, to the excess acid, and that then goes out through the kidneys. Now notice I talked about the kidneys several times. So it turns out that all this excess acid load that's being handled by the kidneys may be the reason why people's kidneys tend to get worse as they get older. So if you look at kidney filtration rate and kidneys' ability to get rid of toxins, as people get older, it goes down every decade after about age 30. And now I looked at that and I was thinking to myself, gee, I wonder if this excess work on the kidney from all this acid is a primary cause for the loss of kidney function. And actually, just a few weeks ago, talked to a kidney researcher, and he said, I've been thinking exactly the same thing, that's the big problem with Western diet. Yes, the chemicals are bad, the lead, cadmium, mercury, and chemicals, but every day people eat all this excess acidity, and that loads the kidneys. So we can go a little further about that. So it turns out, looking at osteoporosis, everybody thinks about inadequate vitamin D and inadequate calcium as the primary reason for osteoporosis. What if I were to tell you, if you would take a postmenopausal woman who has osteoporosis, and we don't give her any more calcium, we don't give her any more vitamin D, what we do is give her some nutrients that are alkaline forming. And particularly, we give her potassium citrate. So potassium is not calcium. Citric acid is what you get in things like citrus fruits, like oranges and such. But they're both very alkalinizing agents. Give those things to the women at very reasonable dosages, and they recalcify their bones. Okay, because what's happening is, rather than having to use up the calcium from the bone and from the diet to neutralize all excess acidity in the diet, what's happening instead is these vitamins are neutralizing the acidity, so the calcium can go in the bones where it belongs.
Dr. Pizzorno, is there a difference between, so when you mentioned potassium citrate in order to help buffer against the leaching of calcium from the bone and to help to create that state of alkalinity, what about other forms of citrate, magnesium citrate, calcium citrate? Does it matter the type of citrate, or does it have to be potassium citrate?
Yeah, that's a good question. So the two best are going to be potassium and magnesium citrate. That's where the vast majority of research has been done. So you could technically get sodium citrate, but the problem is sodium itself, at the doses we're exposed to, itself is a toxin. So if you use sodium citrate, you get far less beneficial results. Also, calcium is not as alkalinizing as you might expect. Magnesium is more alkalinizing. But yes, calcium, magnesium, potassium citrates all work. Also, calcium, magnesium, and potassium bicarbonate work as well. But again, people might think, oh, well, sodium bicarbonate, that's really cheap. It's baking soda. The problem is the sodium in there is so problematic for the body, it almost neutralizes all the benefits of the bicarbonate. So you can use the bicarbonates as well as the citrates with good results.
So that leads me to this other train of thought, thinking about all of, if we're thinking of the kidneys, we're thinking of water and fluid. There are all these systems out there now talking about alkaline water and,
Yes.
Even attaching devices to the faucet to help
Right.
with changing the pH. What is your take on that? And should we be taking in water that has an elevated pH to help buffer against the net dietary acid load that comes from the foods that we're eating?
Extremely good question. And the issue is not the acidity of the food. What it is that how the food is metabolized in the body. So as I said before, citric acid. So citric fruits like orange juice is very acid, but the body metabolizes it, so it's actually alkaline effect on the body. So the question we should be looking at then is, well, does it matter the acidity of things we drink? And the bottom line is probably not. Now, I'm going to say probably because I haven't seen any research to support it, but I wouldn't think it would work. What's more important is the diet people are eating. Remember, I always say treat the cause. So what is it about the diet that is so acidifying?
Yeah.
So some parts are well known, some parts that are still under research. Number one is, it looks like the primary cause of acidity in the diet are two factors. Number one is sulfur-containing amino acids. So one reason why meat eaters have more acid diets than vegetarians is that meat eaters tend to eat proteins that have more sulfur in them. That's number one. Number two, and this is a big surprise, sodium chloride consumption. Now you might say, wait, sodium chloride, that's a neutral salt, and it is a neutral salt. So there's something, it's not understood exactly what's happening, but it turns out that 50% of the acidity of the diet is from sodium chloride consumption. And what it looks like is, once again, poor old kidneys. When a person's consuming a lot of sodium chloride, the kidneys are having to deal with getting rid of that excess sodium, and it appears to impair the kidney's ability to get rid of acids. Okay, so that's what happens. You get sodium chloride impairs kidneys' ability to protect us from excess acidity. So the first thing I do is, of course, treat the causes. I tell people, okay, let's look at your protein sources. I'm not saying don't eat meat. I'm not going to say don't eat meat. I'm not going to say you have to be a vegetarian. But I'm going to say let's look at what forms of meat you're eating and see if we can kind of decrease a little bit the sulfur-containing amino acids. But by far the big thing I'm going to suggest is decrease your salt consumption. Now you might ask, what's the primary source of salt in the diet? You want to guess, Deanne? You're pretty knowledgeable. You might guess, but you might be wrong. You want to take a risk?
I don't know if I want to take a stab here. The primary source of salt in the diet.
Right.
If we're not eating a processed diet,
Oh,
well,
no, don't make that assumption. Just average American diet. What's the primary source of salt?
oh, well, I would definitely say some processed food of some sort. Uh,
Yes, but it's not going to be the one you're going to guess. I'll bet.
Is it, oh gosh, you'll just have to tell me.
Okay, baked goods.
Baked goods. Oh my
Baked
goodness.
goods.
Yeah.
So people long known this idea about. They're wondering is wheat acid forming? Well,
Mm-hmm.
if you look at the research, wheat maybe a little bit, but not much. The problem is we don't just eat wheat; we eat stuff with the wheat.
Mm-hmm.
And it turns out that you look at bread, pizza, pasta; these all have a lot of salt in them. So
Hmm.
about a third of the total salt consumption for the average person comes strictly from products that are made with grains.
That makes sense because salt is used as a preservative. And so in a lot of these baked goods, you're essentially trying to prevent microbial growth. And, that does make sense, although that might not be the first thing that comes to many people's mind.
No,
Now, I know that we just have a couple of minutes, but you said so many things that were so intriguing, and I just have to ask you quickly, and maybe you can just go through just short responses for each of these questions. But when you say sulfur-containing amino acids, and yes, animal protein is a source of that, but number one, don't we need sulfur to help the liver do its job in detoxification? So how can sulfur-containing foods be all that bad? Number two, I wanted to get some clarification on citrus because this is definitely a naturopathic principle of, that as the body metabolizes citrus, that it takes that acid and creates the alkaline. But can you talk about the biochemistry of that a bit? Because I've heard that, other people have heard that, but what is the biochemistry of that specifically? Or is it because the citrus bioflavonoids play a role in hepatic detoxification processes that we see that effect? So perhaps you can address that sulfur containing amino acids question and then the citrus a little bit more.
sure. So yes, absolutely, we need sulfur. No question about it. And the case could be made. Maybe it's not so much the sulfur-containing amino acids, but that we're not consuming our fruits and vegetables because your main alkalizing factors are your fruits and vegetables. So it may not be so much that the sulfur-containing amino acids are the problem. It's just that people eat so much meat to the expense of eating enough fruits and vegetables that it's an overload. So
Mm-hmm.
it just may be a simple imbalance. I'm not going to say sulfur-containing amino acids are bad for us because, like you say, we need, phase two sulfation in the liver is one of the very important ways the body gets rid of many of the chemical toxins we're exposed to. So that's really quite important. I'm sorry. What's your second question again?
Yeah, the second one was about the citrus, how you said that even though it's acid, it
Oh,
is
right.
metabolized in the
Yes.
body. Mm-hmm.
Right. So whenever we take chemicals into our body, whether they're foods or poisons we're exposed to in the environment, our body has to metabolize them, which means breaks them down into constituent parts. So depending upon the constituent parts that the body breaks them down, then determines whether they're acid or alkaline. So it just so happens because of the way citrate is made as a molecule, when we break it down, we're able to get rid of more acid from the body. And so that's why it's alkalized in the body. Now, in terms of your carotenoids and flavonoids, I would expect to have a somewhat alkalinizing effect in the body because remember, fruits and vegetables are your
Mm-hmm.
primary sources of alkalinity.
Mm-hmm.
Some of it is indeed coming from your carotenoids and flavonoids, but the research that's been done has been specifically mineral citrates.
Fascinating. Oh my goodness, you're such a wealth of information. So I'm going to just, in this final couple of minutes, one of the other aspects of the Detox Summit is not just to focus on the nutritional, physiological aspects of detoxification, but then also to look to the other side of psychosocial toxins, things like emotions and thoughts and relationships, jobs, you name it, all the other issues of lifestyle. And, what I love about your lifestyle is that you truly are a lover of nature, and I know that you travel the world on your motorcycle with your
Yes.
wife, Laura. And so, what can you offer in the way of now turning the lens a little bit differently into looking at, self-love, looking at toxic thoughts? Do we get toxins in other ways that we can remedy by changing our lifestyle?
So this is one which you might want to consider interviewing my dear wife, Laura. Laura was one of the first women to graduate from Yale Divinity School. So this whole idea about spirituality and thought and health, she's actually looked at a lot, and she actually wrote the chapter on spirituality and prayer and health in my textbook of natural medicine. So having said that, there's no question that how people think and feel and consider themselves in the world and the people around them has an impact on their health. So yes, toxic, negative feelings clearly have a negative impact on our health. And I've had just so many examples of patients where the factor that cured them wasn't my biochemical intervention, which, me, I love biochemistry. It was what they needed to learn as a human being. I'll give you a story. So this is a woman came to see me. She was a nurse. And she came in quite upset. She had already seen her medical doctor. And she came in upset because she was scheduled to have her kidney removed. And the reason her kidney was going to be removed is because her sister had a problem called renal artery atresia, and it's in the family. And the way it's diagnosed initially is young people have very high blood pressure. So her sister had very high blood pressure, diagnosed with basically scar tissue, you might say, around the artery going to the kidneys. And the only way to fix it at that time was removing the kidneys. Now the surgical procedures have improved where they can actually open up the artery and connect it to the kidney and not have to take out the kidney. But at that particular time, losing the kidney was the deal. So she came to see me, and of course, me, diagnosed first, treat second. I checked her blood pressure, and sure enough, she had very high blood pressure. She's only 30 years old. And I said, well, did the doctor do the other test? She said, what other test? I said, well, when the kidneys are not have enough blood supply like this, they'll start secreting hormones, and those hormones will show up in the urine. And she said, no. She said, my sister had it. It runs in the family. I had high blood pressure, therefore I have it. And seriously, she was scheduled for surgery the next week. I said, well, let's make sure you actually have this condition. So I got her to collect her urine. You have to collect urine for 24 hours, and you run through the lab. And she came in. I looked at her and said, you don't have this condition. I said, you have it. You have high blood pressure because of the fear you had because your sister had it. And I looked at her and I told her, you could see her body just kind of relax. She came back a week later and her blood pressure was normal.
Oh my goodness.
Yes. So this is a person who, based on her belief, because this is really tragic. You lose your kidney, it's half your system there. You lose your other kidney, you're dead. So she was very upset about it, worried about what happened to her sister, and she basically gave herself high blood pressure. And as soon as the body realized it was not the condition, it went away. So our bodies have remarkable ability to both cause us as ill as well as cause us health. And so one of the things I always tell my patients, and one of the critiques I have of conventional medicine will say, oh, you have incurable disease. What they should say is, I don't know how to cure you. Let's see if we can find somebody who does. So when I see my patient, I tell my patient, every patient, I say, I don't know if I know how to cure you. I do know I know how to get you healthier. And often what's happened, when you get people healthier, the disease they have goes away.
Yes, everything falls in line. Oh, that's a totally different perspective, right? It's talking about coming from the angle of health rather than trying to conquer disease. And so it's more of a positive approach. I really like your story, Dr. Pizzorno, because I even think of traditional Chinese medicine that the kidney is connected to the emotion of fear. And so seeing that come through in that story was very powerful. So, any final comments that you'd like to give to the listeners about detoxification, retox, toxicity in general before we leave this very exciting conversation with you?
I would say we need to appreciate our bodies have tremendous ability to heal if we just give them the chance. And I think that is the key we always have to be thinking about, and that is, what does the body need to heal? So one of the wisest clinicians I know is Dr. Sid Baker. At a conference several years ago when he was lecturing, he said something which I have now repeated to many, many students and many doctors ever since. And he said, all of medicine really is quite simple. Get into the body what it needs and get out what it doesn't.
Yes.
And I think that is incredibly wise.
That is. Absolutely. It's looking at that balance. Well, Dr. Pizzorno, how can listeners reach you? What is the best way to find you? What is your website? How can we get more information about you?
Well, you can. You're welcome to go to my website, drpizzorno.net, drpizzorno.net. But I have to tell you, I don't see private patients anymore. I'm focusing all my life right now on research and teaching and writing. Of course, I guess I do have 10 books. So
yes.
go to Amazon and put Pizzorno in. You'll find a bunch of books.
Yes, and also by your wife, who has a number of books as well. She's a writer. So
yes. So probably the book most appropriate for the consumers is called The Encyclopedia of Natural Medicine, which I wrote with Mike Murray. one of my students.
Yes.
The other book, which I'm proudest of, is called Total Wellness, but unfortunately it's out of print. I wrote it back in 1996. But I have good news for those who want to read it is I'm now negotiating with a publisher to come up with a second edition. And I've actually just about completed writing it. So I'm hoping it'll be pretty soon.
Fabulous. Well, I know that with you, there will always be more to come, more books. And so we'll stay on the pulse of that. Thank you so very much for being part of the summit and for sharing your wisdom, your knowledge. This has been a wonderful interview.
Oh, you're most welcome.